Hello, everyone, and welcome to Exoconscious Humans YouTube. This video presenting Richard Sauder's research was recorded on October 20th, 2023, nearly 6 months before this April 8th, 2024 eclipse that is coming toward us. Richard is a leading expert in underground and underwater bases. He dedicated years to meticulously researching government documents at national libraries and speaking with experts at facilities. As the April 8th eclipse passes and makes an X across the Texas Hill Country, Richard shares his expertise in research. He has a BA in sociology, 2 masters, one in Latin American studies and the other in forestry, and a PhD in political science. Richard's books include, and I encourage you to read, Underground Bases and Tunnels, What is the Government Trying to Hide? Underwater and Underground Bases, Surprising Facts the Government Does Not Want You to Know, and Hidden in Plain Sight, Beyond the X-Files. Richard's Substack is at Richard Sauder. Additional contributors to this eclipse discussion include Susan Manewich, Yvonne Donaldson, Natasha Kealoha, Nancy Tertre, Dan Brock, Roger Oney, and myself, Rebecca Hardcastle Wright. All of our bios are available at exoconscioushumans.com. Please subscribe to and like our channel. You can read more about our community at our Substack, Exoconscious Humans. With a paid $8 subscription, you can join our monthly Exoconscious coaching through our Substack. Enjoy Richard's exciting and rare perspectives on the April 8th eclipse.
I think this is a very august group. I'm impressed, and I would even say dazzled by many of the things that have been said. Roger, I lived in New Mexico for many years. You went there for a reason. It's the land of enchantment. And buddy, if you haven't been there long, you will find out why it's called that. I have to say that, like Nancy, I think it is, I have also come in front-loaded at the age of 3. And I'm from Tidewater, Virginia, which is where I was born, which is one of the darkest places on the planet in terms of the military-industrial complex. I know what's above ground and above water in Tidewater, Virginia. It's only been in my adult years that I have discovered there is certainly quite a lot below ground in Virginia as well. But at the age of 3, I was, an entity came to visit me, whom I spontaneously named the Bone Lady. And she gave me a huge mental telepathic download, which I remember to this day and thought about every day for hours until I was in my mid-30s. For a solid 30 years, I thought about her and her message for hours every single day of my life. What she loaded me with was that this terrible time is coming. We're going to see terrible events in the coming weeks, months, and years. A lot of death and destruction, and also, cheek by jowl with that, a surprising amount of enlightenment. But there will be death. The message she gave me was basically the Hopi message. It's essentially the message that any entity who is spiritually aware on this planet and presumably on other worlds will realize that we as individuals and as a collective on this planet, presumably far beyond, are faced with a choice. None of us can be Jesus himself, but we can be, to an astonishing degree, Christ-like or Jesus-like, if we so choose. On the other hand, we can also go far to the dark and become demon-like or satanic. And we see indeed millions of people on this planet have done that and are doing that right now. That is the essence of the Hopi message, that in this time, humanity, we as individual humans and as a human collective on this planet, we have a choice. We can choose a positive, creative, constructive, upward bound spiritual route, or we can turn to the dark side and choose war and destruction and death and mass slaughter. Read the headlines, watch the news. We are poised on that keen knife edge right now. And we all have to choose individually and as a species. But we're going to see terrible events, and we're going to see majestically uplifting events. Well, as for that, I no longer, obviously, am in Virginia. I did go out to New Mexico and had some experiences out there that I would characterize as astonishing, Roger. UFOs, military complex, underground bases. I became so much more aware of all of that in the years I was in New Mexico. And by the way, New Mexico and all of its military industrial complex above and below ground, the whole UFO phenomenon was directly in the path. I mean, smack dab in the middle of the path of this partial solar eclipse, annular solar eclipse of several days ago. So all of that was activated. And I'm only realizing now that the Bone Lady, she massively front-loaded me. I was brought in to do some certain things, which I'm still discovering. I have academic degrees, 4 degrees in 4 different fields. I also have reasons for being here. One of the reasons is I know from my personality type, I'm like a catalytic converter. I'm a catalyst. My job is not necessarily to put things together. My job is to shake things up for other people to figure out, well, everything just, Richard, what are you doing? Well, I'm just being myself. I'm shaking the situation up and I'm shaking you up. Now, your job is to figure out how to put it together. My job is to break it up into pieces, like a kaleidoscope, because that's how I see things. I have plotted this eclipse this past Saturday and the one coming up on April 8th. And the X marks the spot right smack dab in the middle of the Texas Hill Country. I lived and worked in that region of Texas for a solid decade. And in fact, I plotted the epicenter of the Texas Hill Country solar eclipse X. It's in or around the Nowheresville of Vanderpool, which I know because I used to work there. I used to go out there and work for a wealthy Houston oil man. I was taken out there, unbeknownst to me at the time. I knew nothing of these coming solar eclipses. And I went out there under desperate economic times. Shortly before I left Texas, I laid down to sleep, was sleeping on the floor at that time. And I didn't have a lot of money, so it doesn't cost anything to sleep on the floor. I laid down on the floor. No sooner had I laid down and shut my eyes, and I felt like I had been tossed 3 feet into the air. It was a very real physical sensation. I had instantly switched into an alternate reality, which has happened to me many times over the years. It was indistinguishable to me from ordinary 3D physical reality. I went up and down. I thought instantly, this is the big one. The North American plate is cracking in half. This has to be like a 10.0 or bigger. And that went on for, 30 seconds, 90 seconds. And then it ended abruptly. And I was left laying on the floor in the dark, waiting to hear the sirens and the shouts and the explosions from people's houses blowing up from broken natural gas lines and that kind of thing. But there was a preternatural silence, no dogs barking, no sound at all. It was as if I were in a vacuum. I then understood instantly. I was given a preview of coming attractions. I left Texas not too long after that. And then I did my last, I have a history of nonviolent anti-nuclear protests, including, but not only, on the launch lids of nuclear missile silos. And after I was released from jail in North Dakota in July of 2010, I, within a matter of months, left the place and came down here to Ecuador, where I've had more visions, more experiences, and I've seen more UFOs and ETs. Yeah, they're here. So are the UFOs. Ecuador has a lot underground as well. What I could say is, my time in Arkansas also, the other solar pathway that's coming up on April 8th is going to come up through Mexico, up through Texas, again, right through the hill country in the San Antonio area. Then it's going to go up through the Fort Hood area, and now it's called something else, and up through Arkansas, right through the former nuclear missile silo field where I used to protest in past decades, was also incarcerated. So this is what I communicated to Rebecca, whether it's, I also had my time in the Yucatan. The solar eclipse last weekend went right through the Yucatan and then came down through Central America and through Colombia and went out through the Amazon out to sea. So much of my life, decades, have been spent living and working along both of these solar pathways, including a solid decade right at the epicenter of this Texas Hill Country solar eclipse X. And it became clear to me that it's not only about me, but I was taken to these places, and a lot of my work for money and also just for academic work and hiking around, walking around, just living and being this places has to do with this solar eclipse X. I was born for this time. And when I became aware it was going to happen, just I think a matter of a month or two ago, I realized this has everything to do with my life pathway for decades, including the epicenter of it, and working all over the Texas Hill Country, knowing so many people there. I've observed things there that I won't speak publicly about. There are heavy things going down in the Texas Hill Country, including below the surface. And with that, I will yield the floor to others.
Thank you, Richard. So let's just bring in your skill and your orientation and your education to this eclipse that Richard just cited that is past and coming up in April. Maybe you've had similar types of visions or knowledge. Maybe that would be appropriate also. I know, Susan, you have, if you want to.
Is it the eclipse or what is it? I write about the electromagnetic changes and the geomagnetic changes because I think that it's really important that we understand, the relationship that's ongoing here. And, I don't have a crystal ball to know exactly what's going to happen when it happens, but I'm pretty good. I think like the rest of us are probably here, at tracking energy and tracking the trajectory of what may be next based on, where we were, where we are, where we have been. And, it seems to me that the relationship with the sun and the earth is something as far as human behavior, human energy itself is changing really rapidly. And, what I've seen in visions have been playing out now. So visions I've had as a 5-year-old are playing out. And even though I've always been not attached to them, because that's a sane way to live for myself, they're playing out now. And, then you go, okay, check mark, let's pay attention to that. Like, the world being more chaotic, people, being more chaotic as well, and also the patterns of the weather changing on the planet. That looks like this is just so much of a part of it. Earthquakes, volcanoes, those types of things. Even breath. Sometimes people are having a hard time breathing, as well, which was something I saw in my visions as well. It does seem to be, I would say I don't know about the eclipse itself, but I do know, that relationship is an important part. My sense is that we are at the cusp of this solar polar reversal. The last time we had it was around 2012. And it looks like in the next couple of months, that will probably start again, which is important because that's around an 11-year cycle, but it looks like we're on an earlier cusp of that happening. And I can't help but wonder, okay, so the fact that that's happening, you've got these eclipses that are happening, we're into some very high charged energy times, and maybe even a very new way of life. And new could be something that's challenging. New may not be like, oh my God, amazing. It could be very challenging. So I think the bottom line is to figure out a new way of how we interact with ourselves and each other with these rapidly changing energies. And I don't necessarily mean the external, I mean the internal. And I think why having this type of format and call and open conversation is really helpful, because I don't think any one of us, even though we've got all this stuff that we have and do, I don't think any one of us have it figured out. And I'll go back to the research that's in the Beyond UFOs book that came out. One of the most important messages that the beings were giving to those of us that, in all the people, about 5,000 people that were having contact, is your planet is going to be going through some massive changes. Your capacity to collaborate and to learn how to work with one another is going to be really essential. So,
Yvonne, you want to?
I am following along, and thank you for sharing your perspectives and your viewpoints here. And I too was awakened earlier in life to these changes that were coming. And for what that did for me was I went into the fear of it. And so I've spent the last few decades getting out of the fear of it and looking more grounded and practically at, like, okay, so this is happening. What's my part in it? What is it that I can tune into? What is it that I can affect that is genuine and authentic for me? Because we're all part of this free will experiment here. And and so it's not just one timeline. It's everybody has their space and place here, and we're all in this evolutionary leap from a body-based intellectual sort of way of being into a intuitive, spiritual space. And a few years ago, it was pretty clear that we'd gone off the edge of the waterfall, and now we're woo. It's not talking about it anymore. It's like it's go time. So in just watching Susan share too, I was reminded of these plasma flows that are coming in to the earth from the cosmos. We look at the moon, we see light, and now recently more than ever, the light has a quality, a texture, information, data. How is that flowing in? What is influencing that? And how is it being received in the earth energies and in each individual, and what changes are being activated. So yeah, I totally agree. Not one of us has all the answer. I don't think we're designed to be that. I think we're a group project. Humanity is a group project. And yet the more coherent we can be in our multi-dimensional space, then the clearer the communication can be. And in looking at this Eclipse X and what it's bringing up, wow, you know, the Texas X is so being brought into our awareness in a whole new way. For me, learning about the deep underground military bases and the different layers of deceit and lies and things to cover up what's going on, it's just all being peeled back and brought forward. So again, are we going to step into fear around this, or are we going to take a good look at it and see what can be? Why is this coming up now? What is it that we can do to affect a positive shift or a positive way forward? What I'm also noticing too, that in this juncture that we're in of space, time, and energy, is that it's not just the past 50 years or 100 years. It's 100,000 years. It's 1,000,000 years. It's 1,000,000,000 years. It's like it's a really key juncture point where a lot of nodes, a lot of time streams, sort of everything that was here before that is not resolved is up for alignment, and we can bring proper closure to what we're complete with, and move forward with a much more capacity to be in the now and creating something brand new. And I feel like that is part of just what's written in the system here. And what we can become more aware of is what we're complete with. So if there are those of us that are living here that are complete with control over the top down, the military, the war, the fighting, we get to have that proper closure. And part of that requires us to see what is here now is still in play and being brought forward in different ways to implement so that it can have tentacles and start growing again in a new way, or we can be complete with it. So we're at this point here where I'm very grateful for this information to be brought forward and to be in this group where we can look at it in a neutral, compassionate, grounded manner to see what it is for us individually that we're complete with and we would like to move forward to, and what we're still in progress. What are we still working on? What's not quite complete within our own systems and as a collective.
Natasha, do you want to give us some insight astrologically? So there's a few astrologers in our group, but I would really like to hear your view of the eclipse, the one past and the one coming.
Yeah, for sure. Everything that has been said already has been definitely can be found in the influence of the astrology of right now. And any eclipse season is going to be potent because it always initiates rapid change. A solar eclipse always happens on a new moon, and the new moon is usually the invisible part of the lunar cycle. However, when the moon passes in front of the sun, all of a sudden the moon becomes visible. And in astrology, the moon represents the unconscious and the sun represents the conscious. So there is always, in any eclipse season, especially around a solar eclipse, there is always going to be the energy of what was once hidden or buried, like secrets, truths, emotions, or memories that become unveiled. And this can actually influence us collectively and individually in really varied ways, because it really depends on where that particular eclipse is going to hit in your chart, where some people may really, really, really feel it, and some people may really just kind of like observe other people really going through stuff. And with this particular eclipse, it happened in Libra, the one that just happened on the 14th. And Libra is the sign of balance, beauty, harmony, justice. But it's also on the South Node. And so the South Node right now is in Libra, and the South Node is representative of our karmic past and things that we're ready to release. We're really being invited to expand past our comfort zone. And usually the comfort zone that we've really gotten used to has now become a straitjacket of sorts. And so this is found in this particular solar eclipse that just occurred. And so some of the Libra South Node things that we're being invited to release are avoiding conflict at any cost, even if that cost is our own freedom, sweeping things under the rug, betrayal of boundaries, self-doubt, exuding perfection on the surface or on the outside while hiding a war on the inside. And this can be seen in the external and internal realms. And so this is really getting activated right now, even though it just occurred, we're still very much in it. And but what's really amplifying the energy of this entire eclipse season is all of the other huge astrological alignments that are occurring or on or around this particular eclipse. And so I think the jumping off point for this particular eclipse actually started back in July, end of July. Pluto, Lord of the Underworld, he's actually one of the, well, some people don't consider him a planet, but I do. And he has a 248-year orbit. And so whenever he aspects something in astrology, it's seen as really important or really significant. And so he actually squared the North Node and the South Node 4 times at the end of July and the beginning of August. And now normally Pluto will square the North Node and the South Node twice every 9 years. So it's really rare that he squared the North Node and the South Node 4 times. And the last time he did was 128 years ago, which I believe was like 1895. And so whenever a planet squares the North Node, which represents our path of destiny, and our South Node, which is our karmic past, it's representative of everyone individually and collectively are at a cosmic crossroads. And the biggest question being asked is, are we going to continue to do the same thing we've always done, or are we going to choose to do something different? And so the North Node actually is in Aries right now, and Aries is the sign of the warrior. It's like the sign of standing up, speaking your truth, being seen. But also in the shadow, it's warlords, warmongering, anger, frustration, all of the things that kind of have been touched on. But with the North Node being in Aries, we're actually being invited to expand and heal our relationship to fighting, to war, to the warrior state, really. And we're also being invited to release that Libra South Node stuff of, no, everything's fine. Oh no, everything's hidden. No, we just have to just keep burying it and not looking at it because everything's perfect. Don't look over here. And so Pluto is very much still activating the North Node and the South Node, and he will be until the end of November. So we're actually still very much in the energy of this cosmic crossroads of choosing to do something that we've always done or doing something different. And then the next huge astrology of this eclipse season is actually tomorrow. And Eris, the goddess of discord and chaos, will be aligning with the North Node. And so the way that I was taught to work with Eris doesn't create the discord and the chaos. She just unveils the discord and the chaos that's already present. So she's the unveiler of deep truths. And usually these truths are really hard to face because we could have buried it, we could have denied it, we could have looked away, we could have run away from it, all those things. But Eris actually really invites us to pause and take a good hard look at whatever it is that's coming up for us, internally or externally. And since she's aligning with the North Node being our path of destiny, we're really, really being invited to really expand our relationship with truth, with discernment, with being able to tap into our inner knowing and trusting our intuition on what is true and what is not. And also being in the place of acceptance too around the darker, deeper truths. Because only once we actually start to accept it can we actually start to work with it and move through it, instead of just continuously running away from it and looking away from it. So that's happening tomorrow, and that's happening smack dab in the middle of the solar eclipse and the next eclipse that's coming up on the 28th. And then she also will be aligning again on with the North Node on November. I have the date. I think November 27th. So Eris will be aligning exactly with the North Node tomorrow, and then November 27th. And Pluto will still be squaring the nodes until the end of November as well. And Pluto being the Lord of the Underworld, and he's the planet of deep transformation, of really facing our shadow, of going into the underworld. So it's really interesting that you keep mentioning underground military bases, because the North Node being in Aries, which is war and military complex, and Pluto, what rules the underworld, is really being activated right now. And then the next eclipse that's coming up on next Saturday, the 28th, will be a full moon partial lunar eclipse in Taurus. And the North Node will actually still be in Aries, so it's not going to be conjunct the North Node. But we've actually had North Node Taurus eclipses for the last several years. Well, no, for the last 19 months, we actually had a lot of eclipses in Taurus. And the biggest themes of these particular eclipses that's going to get reactivated during this particular eclipse happening on the 28th is how do we remain embodied when there's chaos everywhere? How do we stay connected, grounded in our own space when it looks like there's a huge collapse happening, because it is. And what's interesting is the tightest aspect that's happening besides the sun and the moon opposing each other during the eclipse on the 28th is Mars, the god of war, will be opposing Jupiter, the planet of expansion. So with that said, Mars is not just the god of war. He actually is a warrior for peace. That's his true essence, but he got distorted somewhere eons ago. And so Jupiter is, whenever Jupiter is really prominent in astrology, we have the opportunity to wherever we're focused on, it's going to expand. So if we're focused on war consciousness, that's exactly what's going to amplify in our space. If we're focused on peace and whatever it is that we also would like to manifest, that's where our thoughts are going to go. So with this particular eclipse, how do we remain embodied and really trust our instincts and our intuition on even when the world is going to crap, it looks like on the outside. But with this Pluto squaring the North and the South Node, the way that I love to look at it is Pluto represents the phoenix. And so we're in the part of the crumbling to ash part where everything needs to collapse. That's out of balance. That's out of alignment. Has cracks in the foundation. And it's up to us to really trust the undoing and the crumbling. Because once everything burns to ash, we actually have the opportunity to build a firmer, more solid foundation in which to rise from the ashes. So we're definitely in this portal of undoing and becoming right now. And it's really just a huge invitation to really remain grounded and flexible and adaptable, well, during any eclipse season, but specifically this one with all of the huge activations that are happening.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad you brought Eris in too, because it's so important for us to learn that part of astrology.
Yes. Oh, and I do have one more thing to mention. The April 8th eclipse that happens next year is hugely powerful. Any eclipses, but this one in particular really caught my eye because there will be a dwarf planet that is aligned exactly to the minute with the sun and the moon during the total solar eclipse in Aries, and that is Chiron. And Chiron is the wounded healer. And so this can be either a really, really deeply healing eclipse where we get to get real and look at all of our wounding and see what really triggers us, or it can trigger our trauma. And if we're really in that deciding point of, do we continue referencing our trauma or do we now reference our healing? And that is really up in this next eclipse. So I think it's interesting that it's the Libra eclipse and the Aries eclipse that are making that X in Texas, because that's the two opposing signs. So Libra opposes Aries, which means they bring balance to each other, but also they can bring imbalance if we so choose to work with it that way. So even if the powers that be would like to use the astrology for, their own agendas, we're being invited to use the astrology and work with the astrology in ways that really resonate with us, regardless of what's happening in the world.
Thank you. Important astrological messages. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Nancy, Roger, Dan.
I mean, I think it's interesting the astrological background as to what you feel is there that's being reinforced by the energies that Natasha was talking about. So I guess I'm always looking for positive ways to figure ways out of a mess. And I mean, we're in we're just up to our eyeballs in doo-doo at this point. I mean, it's just god awful. And so, I've seen, and obviously, I mean, we've all seen this. It's been going on for a long time. And it's now, the fact that we're dealing with, two wars all of a sudden that just kind of popped up, and oh my God, they are just beyond hideous. And we're being bombarded with daily details in a way that we never got bombarded. So it's filtering into our consciousness in a very lurid kind of a way. It's hard to stay balanced and sort of isolated and to try and see a way out of it. For me, the question is, okay, so there's an X, all right, and the X is over that area that you're interested in. And my sense is you're interested in it because you feel there's some really, really dark stuff there that somehow needs to be dealt with. And I'm curious, what does anybody think it needs to be dealt with? I mean, we've talked a lot about, energies being activated to draw awareness, I guess. But my real question is, okay, so you see stuff. And by the way, I know people who've been involved in drilling stuff down below. And I've been aware of that for a long time. And I'm sure all of us have been aware in, the catastrophic stuff that, I mean, Edgar Cayce was talking about. I know that I was very close friends with some of my college friends whose mother was one of the most famous UFO channelers in the world at the time. And she ended up moving to the hills in, I don't know if it was West Virginia or Virginia, because she was absolutely convinced that all of Cayce's, floods, earthquakes, volcanoes, I mean, all the stuff that we're seeing today, she was convinced it was going to happen a few decades ago, but she's since passed away, and it didn't happen during her lifetime. So we're dealing with time frames as usual that are really tough to pinpoint. I think it's easier to pinpoint physical or geographic locations on things, but time frames is tough. But for me, the real question is, so then what are we doing? I mean, and if we're doing something positive to counteract something that we cannot physically unearth, then we have to, I think, kind of laser focus on what it is we want to do. What do we want to accomplish? And obviously there could be no, at least this is the way I'm looking at it, no negativity whatsoever in looking at this or dealing with this. There just can't, because there's way, way, way too much of that going on all over the place right now. I did take a look because I had remembered like the 37th parallel is kind of famous for that kind of stuff. And then I took a look. I thought, well, okay, maybe it's 33rd. I think it's closer to 32nd parallel, which is known to have, I mean, in terms of, let's say, UFO sightings, 32nd parallel has got some of the lowest level of that, interestingly. 33rd also not very high level of UFO, at least sighted activity. So I don't know what that means. Does that mean there's a lack of interest? In which case, is it really that terrible? What's going on over there? Or, I just think it's important to look at the reason. Why is this area being highlighted?
It's being highlighted by the sun itself.
Mm-hmm.
And the sun is calling that particular precise location to our attention. The sun is a mighty being, a mighty consciousness. Mm-hmm. And it's the sun and the moon, along with the moon, that are now drawing a big X on the Texas hill country, a bullseye, if you will, saying, look at that. And it caught my attention because I'm not an astrologer, but I happened to notice that this was going to happen 2 or 3 months ago, maybe. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? I happen to work at the very epicenter, that very X spot, very unobtrusively, very ordinarily, without knowing this is going to happen. So in my case, I was brought there by my subconscious, working obviously in resonance with the sun and the moon and the earth itself, to be there and to live there and to observe the place, the people there, the landscape, just to notice what was going on, to live my life there, and then to withdraw to this southern continent to observe it. What are we to do, I think was your question. To observe. I think to be neutral observers, to be rational, conscious observers, reflective observers, to ask ourselves, what does this mean for me? And in my case, I've lived out, as I said, a huge portion of my life along both of these solar eclipse paths, including a solid 10 years working right at the epicenter. And so for me, clearly the message is that there's a big personal impact for me at a subconscious level. One of the responses I've had is to be sleeping a great deal, to be sleepy. It's tricking me at a deep level. I've had some strange dreams. It's also clear that all of this, as Natasha observed, has to do with powerful cosmic forces, a big side of which is the war impulse on this planet and with the human species. As you observed, war is raging now. And we're on the verge possibly of horrific warfare such as not been seen on this planet probably for tens of thousands of years or maybe ever. And how could that happen? Well, it could all kick off within a matter of minutes. The weaponry that's out there now is stupefying, sobering. And yet here we are right on the precipice, on the brink of this. So what should we do? Well, in my case, I engaged in serious nonviolent civil disobedience. I went right to the scene of the planned genocidal, planet-destroying crime to say, you may do what you want, but I'm giving you my input. I thought about the Bone Lady and what she revealed to me at the age of 3 every day for hours until I was in my mid-30s. And here I am, 68 years old, and I'm still talking about her and her message to you. I have a blog. I've been blogging for years, including about this kind of thing. And one of my readers some time ago said to me, "Hey, Richard, why don't you come back to the United States and show us how it's done?" And I said, "I have a better idea. How about that you show me how it's done?" Because I paid my dues. I paid at the office again and again and again. So if you think it's important that someone do civil disobedience, then you know what? The time has come for you to do it. If you're that serious about it, to mock me, see, I didn't mock that person in return. I simply flipped it around on them. If you think it's important to do something, have at it and stop barking at me. Because, I was on television, I did radio interviews, I was interviewed by newspapers, and literally what I did, millions of people saw what I did, whether on TV or heard about it on the radio or saw my photographs in the newspaper of me on top of nuclear missile silos. In other words, I called the question. I put it up for vote before the American people by their millions, and not only I, but others. And then a big part of my work has been my underground bases research. There are weapons underground. From what I can tell, there are millions of beings underground humans and non-humans. They're very strange and exotic technologies. Some of these spaces are huge. I was told by, and Roger, you're in New Mexico now, that the underground facility beneath the Monsantos is vast. And the man who told me this was at a very high level in the military-industrial complex. Why he talked to me, I don't know. Maybe a burdened conscience. He contacted me. I'd never heard of it. But he was well up in the chain of command. He had real clout. And he told me the Monsanto base is vast. He didn't say it's big, it's large, it's enormous, vast. This is a polymath, a PhD, colleague of Edward Teller, someone who used language very carefully. So when I say, and the Monsanto underground base was directly in the path of this eclipse a week ago, vast. I've talked to a couple of people who've been in there. They were very guarded in what they said and revealed almost nothing. These underground spaces are huge. From what I've been able to find out, I'm guessing trillions of dollars have been lavished on their construction, operation, and maintenance. We truly don't know what is in these places. It's very sobering. It's very, I'm dismayed. The fact that it's all concealed and kept so secret from us suggests to me that nothing good is going on in them. You know, we're talking about a parallel reality here, a literal parallel reality, because when you're in this world, in these projects, you may have a significant other, a wife, a husband, a lover, a mistress, children, colleagues, to whom you say nothing about any of this. The intelligence agencies do this, and by the way, so do the extraterrestrials. Anyone who's interacted with extraterrestrials will notice that they're secretive, but in an unusual way. They simply don't talk. They're very telepathic, but they don't talk. They don't run their mouths. That's what we're up against. And a huge part of the military and a big part of the Fortune 500 and also religious organizations like the Vatican are involved in this.
I want to give Dan and Roger a chance to respond.
Exoconsciousness is about higher consciousness, and that's where we're going. So I don't see this event as anything that I don't want to diminish it, but I don't see it as anything unusual. It's not surprising that this would be the case, that this is the either impression or the physicality of what's going to happen. Be it actually happen or be it not happen. We are still heading in the direction of a higher consciousness. Specifically with this eclipse, one of the things that I have noted about eclipses is the solar eclipses wind up being a little bit more about the collective. Lunar eclipses wind up being a little bit more about the internal or personal perspective, at least in terms of opportunities for change. And this certainly resonates with this particular event. And it's interesting to note that the lunar eclipse, which happens not this year, but next year, I think it's on March 25th, is also in Libra. So it's in early degrees of Libra, which the eclipse that happened just last weekend was in Libra. So I feel that internally we have this notion of things being unbalanced, and we have to come back to a point of balance with who we are as a person. And this aligns with why we're all collected together having this discussion about all of these topics. I don't feel, I myself worked as a nuclear engineer. I used to work on submarines, carriers, and cruisers on the propulsion side, but I had to leave that because at the time I'd really become enamored with the idea, well, what are we doing this for? It's like submarines that follow other submarines. I mean, come on, that's a huge waste of money and waste of resources. Forget the war component, which is whole nother concept to fathom. And I've aligned myself considerably differently over the years with treating what I think of as important. What is in my mind, in my feeling, in my spiritual self important. The sharing of this information, the collective of people together, helps the movement of all of us to a higher consciousness in this process.
Thanks, Dan. Roger?
There's so much that's been shared. I really just want to express like a deep gratitude for this conversation. Nancy, there's a big part of me that's very practically minded. And so the question of like, what are we going to do about it? I think is a great question. And I guess like what I've been working with this past like 3 or 4 years, especially, like Dan, when I hear you say, we're going to evolve or our consciousness is going to evolve. I guess I'm at the point where I'm not so sure that that's the case for everybody. And I think that's been the biggest work for me is a lot of work to respect that there are people who want the program. They want the narrative. They don't want to take the responsibility to be free. They don't want, just to accept it. I mean, because it helps me then refocus on what I feel guided to do, which is to work with those who do want to be free, who do want to see the truth or see reality for what it is. And I'm just fascinated by this whole topic because it's interesting to me how the earth or, the inner earth or, below the surface, how it has so many negative connotations. And I want to share I had an experience with, there were 3 beings who were from below the surface, and they were really large beings, and they were very quiet and the feeling as an empath, the feeling from them, I felt absolutely safe in their presence. I felt they were the most powerful, gentle beings that I think I've encountered, and that has stuck with me like for a long time. So I think there's a lot of mystery, and I think our attention is often directed by design to the sky, the stars. Not that there there are amazing things out in the universe probably, but I think that's where my work is. That's where I keep coming to is, where are we being directed? Where are we being programmed? What is that about? And because what that takes us away from is our direct experience, our subjective knowledge, our subjective experience. And the much, much bigger thing is our ability, or it's through the direct experience and through the inner turmoil and through the inner strife that we're going to activate our potential. And that to me is what's going to shift and change things in any positive direction, is individuals being able to tap into what they themselves are individually truly capable of, what their own potential is. And the difficulty is we're coming out of a time, I think it's inevitable that things are going to change. And the time we're in is very mind focused, and the mind is, very few people really have mastery over their mind. Right. So I think this is kind of just where I'm at with all this conversation. So
there's so much to process here. And I'll just second Roger with just saying thank you everyone for what you've brought forth. And I like what Roger said about the underground experience, because as a child, I was always pulled under the ground. I was underground with beings, and it was perceived to me as a safe and welcoming space. And then when I started years ago reading Richard's books on the underground bases, and I had to look at that. Because I'd been underground in Appalachia, where there's a lot of activity underground, military, intelligence, government, as well as beings that are there for us to encounter. And I agree also with Dan that that this exoconscious community, it offers people a place to come who, like Richard said, I'm not we anymore. I'm not a we. I'm a sovereign, moral, individual human, and I pick and choose with whom I relate, with whom I accept information as accurate. And for many years, I used to know that I was going to be working with a remnant, so we can perceive ourselves as a remnant in the direction that we're moving right now, because we are fashioning a separate timeline. And like Tasha was talking about, we can be taking Jupiter and expansion into expansion of peace, like Richard's dedicated his life to. And I think that's the timeline of this group. And I think that as this group and these examinations grow, that we're going to be attracting renegades from these other groups that no longer fit in with a role, like Dan said, left nuclear engineering. And I think there'll be renegades that will leave and will find us. And part of our mission is just to hold the space and to be the vessel that offers some sanity as these events unfold. And what we do next, it's not up to me. I just gathered everybody here because I felt like what Richard had brought to our consciousness with his work in the underground bases, and I just encourage everyone to read his books. They are just in your face information about what's under our feet, and you just get such an orientation to the fact that what a surface dweller I am. I know we call ourselves exoconscious and we identify as cosmic, but the underground, we're surface dwellers when it comes to that knowledge that Richard has provided us with. So I would just, in these few closing minutes, I just like to offer, not only think about the activation of the X over Texas, but also the activation of ourselves as individuals and as an exoconscious community with this guidance that Richard's given us. Thank you, Richard.